Hello friends, it's me, and today, Win or Die. Let's check out Film Theory, who really belongs on the Iron Throne, House of the Dragon, from the film theorist. Together, let's go. Let's start.
Who should really be sitting on the Iron Throne in House of the Dragon? Is it the king's daughter and his chosen heir, or his eldest son? That is the central conflict of this Game of Thrones, and today I'm going to find the definitive answer with a whole lot less fire and blood, using something way more terrifying than dragons: the law. Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory, the show that absolutely wants to sit on the Iron Throne. I mean, it's a chair made of swords. That's two of my favorite things. Come on.
Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory.
How freaking cool is that? If you have somehow missed Game of Thrones and its prequel show House of the Dragon, or Hot D as the fans call it, respectfully of course, how did you do that? This was like the biggest thing in the world for a minute there, and I gotta say, I freaking loved Game of Thrones. Like, it had so many of my favorite things, like swords and dragons. Honestly, that's the list. That's all you need. Regardless, these are shows based in a
You have swords, you have dragons, and that's it. Yeah!
fantasy world full of all the knights and magic you'd come to expect, but it's much more down to earth. Like, yeah, you have witches and magic swords and dragons, but the battles are brutal. People curse, they get hurt, they die, they get it on.
I could teach you how to do it.
I know how to do it.
Oh, and how's that, John?
Sticking with the pointy end.
Scandalous. And something else realistic in these shows, the politics. See, Hot D starts with King Viserys Targaryen sitting on the Iron Throne. Again, it should be me. I already own enough swords to make my own Iron Throne, but I digress. When the queen dies while giving birth, Viserys is left without an heir, and so he names his daughter Rhaenyra as his successor. No harm, no foul, right? But here's the problem. Rhaenyra is a woman, and because of that, many of the men in this backwards society don't want her to rule. And that becomes an issue when a couple time skips later, Viserys remarries and has several more children, including a son named Aegon. So when Viserys eventually dies, the realm is split between these two sides.
The House of the Dragon does not seem to know who rules it.
In one corner we have the Blacks, led by the chosen heir Rhaenyra, and in the other we have the Greens, led by the eldest male child Aegon. And once this boxing match starts, it descends into a full-blown civil war known as the Dance of the Dragons. And this ain't no cha-cha slide. Cha-cha real smooth. Now, while I'd love to cover this show with some sort of prediction theory, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like we can do that. This show is based on a book that's already been released, and they actually spoil like all of Hot D in the original Game of Thrones if you're paying attention. But no spoilers here.
Like, I literally exist!
Don't you worry about that. So, if we're not predicting things, what are we gonna be doing here instead? Well, we're gonna look at the lore of the world of Game of Thrones, the books and the TV shows and the encyclopedias, and try to figure out once and for all who should win the Dance of the Dragons. Who is the legitimate heir of the Targaryen dynasty? Who in House of the Dragon has the better claim to the Iron Throne and should be the ruler of Westeros? Aegon or Rhaenyra? Pick a side and pledge your loyalty, friends. Let's get to the heart of this burning question. Oh,
Alright, stop the video for one moment and comment down below. Who do you think? Huh? Which one? Comment down below. Thank you so much. Finish? Let's continue.
Just before we hop into things here, I want to clarify that we'll be talking about the canon of the shows today, not the books. While the Game of Thrones shows are obviously adaptations of the Song of Ice and Fire books, they do fork off and kind of do their own thing in a lot of places, combining characters, omitting events, or changing the timeline. So, where we can, we'll be sticking to that, because this is film theory after all. That being said, if the shows haven't covered something yet, then we'll be bringing in book lore to kind of fill in the void, so cool? Cool. To see who has the best claim to the throne here, let's catch up with each of our contenders and see what they have on their side, shall we? First up, Rhaenyra. In the end, Rhaenyra's claim rests solely on the fact that the previous king wanted her to succeed him, despite fathering other children, including multiple boys, for his entire life. Viserys insists that Rhaenyra is his heir. He passes on Targaryen secrets to Rhaenyra meant only for the heir, and he even calls all of the most important lords and ladies in the Seven Kingdoms to swear their allegiance to her. And hey, don't don't sleep on the fact that these leaders swore oaths to Rhaenyra. Keeping oaths is a big deal in Westeros.
I am no oath breaker.
They're considered sacred, religious vows, and oathbreakers in organizations like the Night's Watch or Kingsguard are often put to death. That right there should be a big ace up Rhaenyra's sleeve. So if that's what Rhaenyra's bringing to the table, what does Aegon have? Well, his main claim to the throne is that he's the eldest son of Viserys, and in Westeros, the power to rule has traditionally passed to the eldest living male heir. And that's about it. Like, being real, that's like all Aegon's got right there. Okay, so how is this not an open and shut case for Rhaenyra? The lords and ladies all swore oaths to follow her, and breaking oaths is a big no-no, right? Well, yeah, that's correct. That is a huge point in Rhaenyra's favor, but it's not as ironclad as you might think. While many of the lords do honor their promises, like the Starks and the Tullys,
Starks do not forget their oaths.
House Tully swore an oath to King Viserys. We recognize the authority of the named heir, Queen Rhaenyra.
others just don't believe that they need to. It's easy to forget just how much time passes in Hot D, a full 20 years between these lords swearing their oaths and Viserys' death. And during that time, a lot of the lords who made these oaths themselves died, and their children made no such promises.
Remind me of my father's oath. And tell your mother that the Lord of Storm's End is not some dog that she can whistle up at need to set against her foes.
Honestly, that's a pretty persuasive argument, one also used in Game of Thrones by who is arguably the main character, Jon Snow.
An oath is an oath.
And I'm not beholden to my ancestors' vows.
And
Good points. That's a very good point. Like 上一代的恩怨不要传给下一代。The stuff from the previous generations shouldn't be passed on to the future generations. The promises made by my forefathers, by my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-great-grandfather should not be passed on to me. I should not be born with original sins.
on top of that, other
No, it's not just I. Everybody should not be born with original sins.
lords may believe that this oath is no longer valid. The Greens claim that Viserys changed his mind on his deathbed, deciding that Aegon should inherit the throne instead of Rhaenyra. How convenient for Aegon. Of course, as the audience, we know that that's not the case. This was just a big misunderstanding. But this is used as an argument that Viserys would not have expected the lords and ladies of Westeros to honor these oaths to Rhaenyra. What's more, Viserys' sway as king stopped meaning much after he died. I mean, the unfortunate part of being king is that once you're dead, you're not king anymore. You're not around to make sure that your royal decrees are followed, and you can only hope that people respect your wishes. And if those left behind don't really want to, what's to stop them from doing their own thing? This exact situation happened in Season 1 of Game of Thrones. On his deathbed, King Robert wanted Ned Stark to be the regent until his heir was old enough to rule. But when Ned presented the letter explaining this to the court and the newly crowned King Joffrey, it didn't go as planned.
Is this meant to be your shield, Lord Stark? A piece of paper.
Those were the king's words.
We have a new king now.
King Robert's decrees don't mean much when King Joffrey now rules and can change them. And what happens when Ned tries to step in and alter things? Well, he loses his head for it. If Aegon is crowned king, it just doesn't really matter that much if Viserys wanted Rhaenyra to take the throne instead. So while we'll still count this as a point in Rhaenyra's favor, this isn't the game-winning goal that I think she would hope it would be. I mean, it's certainly not enough for us to call things settled, so we'll need something more to see who's really the rightful heir. Regardless of who ends up on the Iron Throne, they're gonna need something to fill their time, and boy do I have the answer for them with the sponsor for today's episode, Game of Thrones Legends. Game of Thrones Legends is a puzzle RPG which offers a level of depth that you don't normally see in these sorts of games. So while you're slashing through the gameplay of the puzzle side of things, you're unlocking iconic weapons from the show and upgrading them on the RPG side. You can also put together a team from across the entire Game of Thrones universe to help you during the game, and these combos can get wild. Want to team up with Daenerys and Rhaenyra Targaryen at the same time? Or Jon Snow with Tyrion and Criston Cole? You absolutely can. And just like the weapons, each of these champions is upgradable, so the more you play, the bigger your collection grows and the more powerful these heroes and weapons become. Even better, once you've built up your champions and weapons, you can form your own Westerosi house to make alliances or wage war with other players in PvP tournaments and special events. And who knows who you might meet on the battlefield.
I must choose my champions wisely and
and lead my house to victory.
Yeah, that is Kit Harington returning to the world of Game of Thrones for the first time for this game. All of this set to the incredible world and backdrop of the show, from the snowy wastelands north of the Wall to the bustling streets of King's Landing. So if you want to head to Westeros yourself, download Game of Thrones Legends by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. Doing so will net you 50 gold, 3,000 food, and a daily summon token. Thank you again to Game of Thrones Legends for sponsoring today's video, and with all that said, let's hop back in to see who should really be sitting on the Iron Throne. So, okay, what else do we know that we can look at here? What are the other rules of succession? Well, right off the bat, we run into a problem. See, in Westeros, there isn't really a clear written law that we know of that explicitly lays out how the Iron Throne is passed down. Instead,
Oh, so there's an error 404. But you need a magnifying glass to find it.
it's more of a tradition thing. The decision for who rules comes down to something called male primogeniture. Essentially, that's a big old fancy term for the oldest son gets all the stuff, and daughters only inherit if there isn't a male heir. So, just to be clear, by that rule, had Rhaenyra been an only child, the throne would have been hers, whether the lords and ladies of the kingdoms liked it or not. But the second Aegon was born, that threw it all into question. Even though Aegon is the second child, as the oldest son, male primogeniture says that he gets the throne. So that right there is a point for Aegon. And from here, things don't necessarily get better for Rhaenyra. Precedent.
So case and points, if the female was to be the ruler, matriarch. If the male was to be a ruler, patriarch. Look, there have been historical facts that patriarchs have been successful, patriarchs have been failures. Matriarchs have been successful, matriarchs have been failures. I can remember a few matriarchs in which the leader is a female, Queen Elizabeth. And then there's also one more, the Queen. And then she recently stepped down. She recently stepped down to give the crown to her son. She was also queen. Queen some country in Europe. I forgot. Sorry.
Isn't on her side either. See, this isn't the first succession crisis that's happened with the Targaryens, or even the first one that's been in this show itself. Yeah, remember, the whole thing opens with a succession crisis. That all happened because Viserys' grandfather outlived both of his sons, leaving him without a clear heir. So he calls a council to decide whether the throne should pass to Rhaenys, the daughter of his elder son and the eldest heir overall, or to Viserys, the eldest surviving male heir. Oh, and also, hey, just an aside here, but for real, Rhaenys in a story where the main character is named Rhaenyra? I mean, I guess I shouldn't be too surprised this is a plot with two Viseryses, two Aegons, a Daemon, Aemond, Vaemon, Daeron, Rhaenys, Rhaenyra, Rhaena, Baela, Laena, Laenor. It's a lot. Regardless of the confusion.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Using names, we know how this council turns out. The younger male Viserys is chosen over the older female Rhaenys. If we're talking about precedent, that is a cut and dry example of male primogeniture for the Iron Throne itself, so chalk that one up as another point for Aegon. Man, fake laws and fantasy politics are real confusing, aren't they? At this point, depending on the evidence you focus on, you can make a legit argument for both Aegon and Rhaenyra. The old king wanted Rhaenyra, and the lords did swear an oath to her, but do those oaths still matter? And by male primogeniture, Aegon would be the choice, enough so that a younger male heir was chosen in a previous crisis, just like this one. It's tough, because if you choose one side, you basically have to ignore the evidence of the other. It's almost like this is a really well-written conflict. Who would have thought? Still, I want to find a more satisfying answer, and even though we've pretty much exhausted what arguments we can find in the history of Westeros, there is another source we can use as evidence here. Jolly old England.
Oh, come on! First you steal my Game of Thrones, and now you're stealing England from me too? That's literally my whole shtick!
Tom, listen, I understand. I totally get where you're coming from, but counter-argument, swords.
Fair. I'll just go back to my tea and crumpets, I guess.
So...
Game theory, you know? Game.
it's no secret that Game of Thrones is based on British history and culture. Like, if you flip Britain and glue Ireland to the bottom, you just get Westeros. And most of the story's plot beats are based on real-world historical events that happened on the islands. For example, the conflict between the Starks and the Lannisters in Got is based off of the War of the Roses, a civil war between the Yorks and the Lancasters. And the Red Wedding is based on an event called the Black Dinner. You get the idea. So, with all of that in mind, maybe we can look into historical British laws to get more of an insight about who should be the ruler here. My first thought here was to look for some sort of situation where the elder daughter from a first queen was passed over for the younger son of a later queen, and lo and behold, I found exactly that. In the 1500s, King Henry VIII was well known for having multiple wives during his reign. From them, Henry had 3 legitimate children, the elder daughters Mary and Elizabeth, and a youngest son named Edward, and much like Viserys, Henry was very clear about who he wanted to succeed him after he died.
Fun fact, do you know that the King Harry that you're seeing right now, right, he looks like some fat uncle, father figure, but in real life, from what I know lah, he's very handsome and attractive and charming. Now in this picture that you see is like he's a fat uncle, fat father, but in real life lah, is very King Henry is very handsome, good looking, charming, attractive.
Son, Edward.
Technically speaking, he's a king, so all the cosmetic thing, you get the point.
Only if Edward died without an heir would his daughters take the throne, which would eventually come to pass, but that's ancient history. So, putting this in House of the Dragon terms, the younger male heir Aegon was chosen over the older female heir Rhaenyra. Again, another point for Aegon. But that's not the only example we can pull on here. All the way back in the 1100s, King Henry I named his daughter Matilda as his heir after his only son died. However, when Henry eventually himself died, his nephew and eldest male heir Stephen rushed to claim the throne, stealing it from right under Matilda's nose. Yeah, if that setup sounds familiar, it's because that was basically the inspiration for House of the Dragon. Remember how we said that a lot of this series was inspired by English history? And again, this ended with the male heir winning out over the female one. Another point for Aegon. Things are looking really good for Aegon. He has most of the points in his favor, but something that helps him out even more here, well, at least as of the recording of this episode, he's the one actually sitting on the Iron Throne. I know that sounds like a little bit of a circular argument, like, oh, he deserves to sit on the Iron Throne because he's sitting on the Iron Throne, but this is important. Just think about it. While Rhaenyra has been off gathering her allies and writing letters and planning the war, what has Aegon been doing? Well, he's being the king. He's doing all of the kingly duties with all of the symbols of being king. He has the crown, the sword, the Kingsguard, the capital. Unlike Rhaenyra, he was actually stupid enough to get involved with the fighting himself, something which was immediately used as propaganda on the battlefield.
Stalwart men of House Targaryen, your king has joined you, for the Seven have blessed and shielded this host with divine purpose.
Honestly, it's ironic. No one in the actual series, Aegon included, think that he's fit to be king. He's selfish, impulsive, treats others horribly, and is woefully unprepared. On the other hand, Rhaenyra has trained her whole life for it, and has a much better disposition to be a ruler. She's patient, mostly listens to her counsel, tries at every opportunity to keep the peace, and really that's the whole theme of Hot D. It's an exploration of this flawed system of rulership, of giving power to someone who is unqualified just because they're a man, and not to the better person for the job just because they're a woman. So sure, Aegon might have the most points in his favor.
Okay, so look, from what I know, there have been amazing female rulers in the past. Like what I mentioned, the Queen Elizabeth, and the other queen from Europe, I forgot. Very recent. And then if you travel back to, let's say, China, there was a ruler called Wu Zetian, the Iron Empress, I guess? Empress? Yeah. I think the word empress is correct. Okay. Anyways, Wu Zetian, she is strong. During the time in which she ruled, from what I know, the peacetime. Even if it's peace for like 20, 30 years, it's still peace. It's good peace. Yeah. But you know, people also die, so after she passed away then.
In this broken system, legally he might have the better claim, but would he be a better ruler? Almost certainly not. But thankfully for—
That's the thing, he is not prepared. Throughout the entire life, he... How do I phrase it properly? both sides have claims towards the throne, correct? Yes or no? Yes, right? But one side have been preparing for her entire life. Meanwhile, while he's being king, because, you know, male and everything, she has shown that she's much more capable. Look, I'm not trying to say that in this case there should be fights, there should be civil war, there should be bloodshed. She could be an advisor, a minister, right? Let's not cause all this unwanted death, unwanted bloodshed. She could still help the king. And sometimes we must remember, humans, history remembers advisors sometimes more than their own kings. So, yeah. For example, Zhuge Liang is more famous than freaking the king, you know, the dukes. Zhuge Liang, a freaking advisor. An advisor, Zhuge Liang.
For Rhaenyra, this doesn't mean it's impossible for her to win. There is a last ace up her sleeve that she can take advantage of here to swing this whole system back in her favor. See, while all of this legalese and tradition and rules about who's allowed to sit on the throne is important, it's not the only thing that we should be considering here. Something else that might be even more important? Who do the people want to rule them? Yeah, for a show that's about a civil war in the royal family, Hot D has spent a surprising amount of time on the small folk, characters like Diana and Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer. And sure, these characters might have their loyalties, but what's more concerning to them? Getting food and water, taking care of their families, employment, and things are getting increasingly bad for the small folk of Westeros.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Who decides who become the ruler? The dragons? The law? The rules? The traditions? No. The people. The people decide who becomes the ruler.
Civil war has led to a blockade that's cut off access to food in the capital city, while common soldiers are slain by the 100 in battle. They're dying, they're starving, they're getting fed up.
Got enough sheep for your dragons then, but none for us. Where's our meat?
This is bad news for Team Green, and they know it. When the everyman, the small folk, the common people don't feel safe, when they feel angry and neglected, when they don't get what they need to survive, the basic necessities like food, things can go south for the people in charge real quick. In philosophy, this is an idea known as bread and circuses. According to the ancient Roman poet Juvenal, a nation can withstand a lot of hardship as long as they have easy access to food and entertainment. But if all of that goes away, well, just ask...
Riots. I guess. Strikes. Riots.
King Louis about the French Revolution or Tsar Nicholas about the rise of communism in Russia. Not only did those guys do such a bad job of taking care of their subjects and keeping them happy, but they screwed the pooch so badly that their reigns more or less ended the monarchies in those countries. This is why Aegon's advisors are furious when he impulsively kills 99 innocent men just to kill a single guilty one. It makes them look bad with the commoners when they're already on thin ice. If Rhaenyra really wants to win this war, to make up this...
So one side is competent and preparing her entire life, meanwhile one side is the king but is incompetent. Look, if the king grows and improves and develops his skills to be a better king, to be more competent, I believe that she doesn't have the right. Oh, it makes a very good story. Interesting.
Lead that Aegon has, to find a way to beat the Greens without using dragonfire to burn down all of Westeros in the process, she needs to get the common folk on her side. And hey, what do you know, but she's already started exploring this strategy in Season 2, spreading gossip about how the Greens are feasting every night while sending fresh food to King's Landing under her flag. All she really needs to do now to win is just hammer this home. In the end, it's the people that give rulers power, and really this has always been the main theme of the entire Game of Thrones universe. All the way back in the early seasons of that show, they explain,
3 great men sit in a room, a king, a priest, and a rich man. Between them stands a common sellsword who lives, who dies.
Depends on the sellsword.
But if it's swordsmen who rule, why do we pretend kings hold all the power?
The people don't care who sits on the throne, man or woman, royal or not, as long as they take care of the people. So yeah, maybe Aegon has more points in his corner for a rightful claim when it comes to historical precedent and inspiration. But Rhaenyra, if you really want to win the Iron Throne, you can't just look up towards the dragons. You'll need to look at all the common folk around you, too. But hey, another thank you to Game of Thrones Legends for sponsoring this episode. Backers like this help us cover topics we normally wouldn't, so remember to click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to download Game of Thrones Legends and get 50 gold, 3,000 food, and a daily summon token. And as always, remember that it's all just a theory. A film theory. And cut!
Oh, thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in my next video. Subscribe. Thank you. But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut. And I hope to see you all in my next video. Thank you so much. Subscribe. Truly, thank you so much. Thank you.